My father was in the Royal Navy and my grandfather was in the Royal Navy, and one of my uncles was in the Merchant Navy, worked for Union Castle. 3 uncles were in the Royal Navy. I was surrounded by people who, that's what they did. Yes, it's been all my life, so I'm coming to the end of my career now. I was chief elect on a cruise ship, and because when I left the Navy in 1989, then I became a merchant seaman. What I was always told when I was at sea is when you retire, you walk inland with an oar on your shoulder. You can only stop when somebody asks you what it is. My name is Stephen Nicholas, that's Nicholas, and I was born in Gillingham in Kent, in the southeast of England, but I currently live in Northumberland. I first moved up here in 1966. I've lived all over the place. I've lived in the Isle of Wight, I've lived in Germany for a while, and I'm currently back in Northumberland. It's my place of choice. I'm a principal surveyor for DNV, Maritime Surveyor. That involves going on ships, checking to make sure that from a safety aspect point of view, the classification society, that's what it does. I'm particularly involved with dynamic positioning systems. Last week I spent all week at sea. I was a sea cadet, Whitley Bay Sea Cadets from 1971 to 1975, and the Sea Cadet Corps is a charity. It was set up well before the Second World War, principally boys at the time, but I met my wife in there as well, so it was girls as well by the time I got there. So at the age of 12 years old, I joined the Sea Cadets, and when I left the Sea Cadets, I joined the Royal Navy in 1975. The Sea Cadets is a voluntary organisation. It's a bit like the Army Cadets. The Sea Cadets obviously is the Royal Navy, so you wear a Royal Navy style uniform. I would go to naval bases right from the age of 12. I did a gunnery course when I was 14, and I went on Royalist when I was 14 also in 1973. 71 she was commissioned. Royalist was a brig, 2-masted brig, square rig sails, around about 100 tons. She's only 80 foot high, I think the main mast was. She had 2 Perkins diesel engines. I joined it in Gosport in June, July 1973. We sailed to Bray in Alderney, and then we sailed to Cherbourg in France, where we met the Malcolm Miller. Now, the Malcolm Miller was a much bigger vessel. She had 3 masts. She was the same as the Winston Churchill. There were 2 of them. The Sail Training Association, so they were not Sea Cadet boats. Royalist was built on the Isle of Wight in Cowes in 1971, and I think she was scrapped in 2012, and the Sea Cadets obviously decided they needed another boat, and they commissioned a Spanish shipyard to do it. It's a 2-masted brig, which is exactly the same as the old one. It's a bit bigger, better engines. You had a safety harness, but you were only hooked on when you got on the yardarm. So you climbed the mast, you got on the yardarm, and it was only when you started manipulating the sails that you would be hooked on, which I must admit is a bit scary when you're 14. You had to get an offshore hand badge. You would have to touch the top of each mast. So you'd have to climb up the top, touch the top, and come down the other side. And not hooked on either. 80 feet above the deck with the ship rolling all over the place. Very exciting, I would say. And the captains, of course, knew the winds, and they were far more in tune with the wind, weather, and everything else, and with the world that they lived in. When you have enclosed bridge wings and an enclosed bridge, you're kind of isolated from outside. One of the things that you notice with some of the older vessels that you steer, if the wind is coming from your starboard side and you want to move to port, and you have direct steering, it's very easy to move the wheel. If you then got to move the wheel to starboard, you actually feel the weight on the rudder. Of course, with hydraulic steering, you lose all of that. My great-grandfather was a Thames sailing barge master. These could carry 100 tons of cargo. In 1881 in Kent, him and one other man, they had no engine on board, they just had sails, and they would move 100 tons of cargo with 2 men with no engine. And that is skill. Sailing across an ocean is one thing, but in and out of port every 5 minutes, that's quite an achievement.